Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jan Leleyur here at Gated Talent. And for today's webinar, I am delighted to be joined by Karen Lloyd, founder and director of Armstrong Lloyd, a leading recruitment firm specializing in leadership and marketing, to find out how to recover from career setbacks, and how to present this during interviews. So hello, Karen, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Hello, Jan. Thank you very much for having me. So this is a really lovely subject for me. It's very dear to my heart because I think everybody in their career has a setback and they may not realise it at a time. So let's talk it through and who I am to start with. And I thought I'd talk through my career because it's interesting how we position our careers, isn't it? We always talk about positive things in our careers and the steps that we've gone to get to where we are. So to start with, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK. I'm based in Surrey. And I started my career in recruitment straight from university. So I'm what you call a recruitment lifer. I came straight into it and it's been my major career focus. However, in 1999, I also did set up my own recruitment business. So I actually became a board director. So I became beyond a recruiter in that role and was involved in the marketing for the business and also in very much the proactive scaling up of the business. So I took on very much growing the talent pool for our business, driving and changing and putting procedures in place. And within that 14-year tenure at that business, I also set up an e-commerce business. I also set up 2 other niche recruitment businesses with all under the umbrella, which didn't all go as swimmingly as you can imagine. So yeah, life has not had a perfect career trajectory for me either, but it's been a journey and an exciting one. So in 2013, I left the other business and went to work with a technology business where I worked with HR directors and we looked at talent mapping processes and how they would identify the best talent and the best people to come into their business and the easiest process to do that. And then in 2014, I launched my current business, which is Armstrong Lloyd. And as Jan said, I'm specialised in market leadership. We're predominantly based in the UK, but we do cover a couple of roles for companies that also have head offices in the UK and in EMEA and across the USA. So I think this first slide is a really great example, isn't it? It gives you that image. You're on a career ladder, you're on a career step, you're going forward, and of course, we're just going up and up and up. So I'm just going to give an example here, and I'm going to use this case study example of a global VP of marketing who I've currently worked with, and just gives an example of how she had a career setback and how I sort of worked to overcome it. So if you look, this is a textbook career, isn't it? She started as a graduate, she was an internship, she became a marketing exec, and within 2 to 3 years of leaving university, she was a marketing manager, and then marketing director, marketing head of marketing, and VP of marketing, all within 4 years of making marketing manager. So 8 years out of university in a senior leadership role. So I want you to keep that VP of marketing in mind as we go through this. So before we go back to it now, then let's look at a career setback. So she's had a great career up until now, and suddenly a circumstance happens. And a circumstance, a career setback, I define as a circumstance. It's a situation or something that happens in your life. And the setback bit isn't actually what happens to you, it's your response. It's your perception and how you feel out of control. And it's your feeling that it's a career setback. In many cases, it could be an opportunity to grow, but often it's the feeling of being out of control and frustrated, and that feeling of the setback that makes it difficult. And that's where it comes difficult to reframe at interviews. So let's go back. So the example I'm going to go through is of the lady that we're going to talk about, the VP of marketing. Her example was actually a redundancy and layoff. I'm going to cover that in a second. But the following examples are different things that possibly could happen to you at any point in your career. And I guess maybe one of two of these may have happened to you at some point. So it could be that you've taken time out to raise a family, or that you had a family member that was ill, you had to take some time out. It could be that you had a personality clash or falling out with somebody in the business. It could be that you just fell out in love with what you were doing. You didn't want to do it anymore. So, you decided to quit, and then you were in a quandary about where you were going next. It could be that the company you work for failed, and they were in the press for a reason, and you felt tarnished or affiliated or reflected about their business. Or it could be that you have no belief and no power in your career advancement, and that you feel that wherever you turn, you're being turned away and blocked. So the important point here is the response. The response to how you feel about those circumstances, and how it is, and how you internalize this. And this is really, really important for how you come across the interview, because if you start to look at some of those responses, and you start to feel that these were things that happened to you, and they were negative, and you start to build some resentment about it, this is where you can start to it can start to come out to interview, and it can start to affect your attitude. So let's go back to our lady. As I said, right, she's all the way up there, global VP of marketing, working her socks off. The first week of the pandemic hit, and yeah, it was a pretty difficult week for her. Basically, she was called in, and her CEO said, I'm sorry, but I know, well, didn't even acknowledge actually that she'd been working 16-hour days, and she had had built a pipeline of marketing leads for the company. They decided that that basically, they only wanted a sales team now left to close the deals. They didn't need marketing, and her 6-figure salary was going to be a quick win for the company to save some money as a response to COVID. So her response is that she felt totally stitched up, that she had been promised all sorts of things by the company. She was, the week before she was up for an award, she'd been promised share options, and that this had happened to her, and she was really, really angry. And because of this, she had gone to several interviews, and she hadn't, of course, been negative at the career interview. She hadn't said, oh, I was stitched up by my CEO. She did say, oh, I was made redundant due to COVID. But because of her anger, it was still bubbling through. She wasn't performing very well at interviews by the time she got to me. And she was feeling very, very angry that the more she was going for interviews, the more she was being rejected, the more it was the company's fault that she was in the circumstances, and it was perpetuating a bit of a cycle. So this is where psychology a little bit, and this is where mindset and looking a little bit at brain science. So I don't know if anyone else is familiar. I'm sure you've probably seen this model before if you've ever looked at anything, but the Kubler-Ross model is a fantastic model that indicates the series of reactions that you get when there's a change that happens to you, and they're very similar to grief. So as a response, initially our lady was upset, wasn't she? She was like, I can't believe they're getting rid of me. It's really unfair. And then she became very, very, very angry. And at this point, if you get stuck at this point of anger and you're going for a lot of interviews, you're gonna get caught potentially at this part of the cycle for a little bit of time, and it's going to be much harder for you to move into the bargaining point, and after that potentially a bit of depression where things might not go your way. And this graph is linear. It looks like it's linear, but actually for most people it's like a zigzag. So you could go back from feeling depression, and you could go back to the shock and denial, and back to the anger before you finally get to the acceptance. So it's really important that you're aware of something like this, and that you aware of a way of working through this, so you can come through it quicker than just getting caught up in that middle with that emotion piece, with the anger and frustration. So what I want to do is work through a framework model that could potentially help you be aware of what you're thinking and thoughts that are going through. So the first piece at the top is the circumstance. So that's a neutral fact. So in this instance of our example, it's our VP of marketing who was made redundant. It could be, as we said before, it could be that you've had to take time out to care for a relative. It could be that you've had an argument with somebody and you've walked out. That it could be a variety of things that have happened. The next thing is a thought. So this is how you feel about your circumstances. So if you think this was unfair, it was underhand, then you're going to evoke a response of anger probably, or some type of negative feeling. And this will bubble up, even though you learn to reframe it. This will bubble up, even if you try to mask it, and potentially this will come through at interview, and they will see this as part of your attitude. So a really clever way of reframing this is if you start to look at that thought and you start to think, but you have to believe it. You can't just convince yourself. You have to start to work through and trying to think of another way to think about this. At the end of the day, it wasn't a personal factor that she was made redundant. He didn't just pick her. It was a circumstance of COVID. He was probably under an awful lot of pressure himself. There were other underlying factors in the company, and there was somebody that had to go, and that actually this could be an opportunity for you. And if you start to get the thought process to start to feeling that you're feeling optimistic and that you're excited about the future, you will find that your action at interview means that you're going to start to naturally come across as more positive, more enthusiastic, which will align as a result of your attitude. Now, I appreciate this is a very simplified version of this, and this is something, to be fair, I use this model every day of my life with all sorts. You can apply it to anything, but it's one, you can do some further reading on this, but it's a really, really brilliant model if you can start to use it to work out what that thought is that's causing that feeling. And if you can change that thought and you can change your feeling, it will evoke in a potentially different action and result at interview. So how do you do this? It's really easy, isn't it, for me to put this model up and say off you go. So let's talk about how you go about doing this. And the first thing you need to do is you need to go back and be a bit of a detective in yourself. So go back over your last job and really take some time, get a piece of paper and start to brainstorm and jot down what were the things you were trying to achieve. This could also help you write your CV as well, but also it's going to help you with your model and thinking about what you're doing, and it will also help you with interview questions. And I want you to really focus on what went well in your last job. What were you good at? What was a part of your skill? What did people talk positively to you about? And we always have to look at the balance. So what didn't go well? So was there something that perhaps led you to the situation? Was it an outburst? Was it something as a circumstance that maybe have led you to that? What can you learn from that, and what can you differently next time? And if you can identify this and start to reframe your losses and see it as an opportunity, it will help you evolve your thinking. What you're looking at this point, you want, and identify what those current skills are and any gaps that you're going through to that. So I want you to know that the purpose of this is not to beat yourself up, and it's not to go over and over and over again about the conversations you may have had at your work, but it is just to try to think as objectively and differently, almost like you're taking a telescope and looking back on your life as though you're not you, and you were telling this about somebody else, and then seeing what you can learn from those points. Once you've done this, you can start to look that this is that opportunity to move forward, that you start to feel optimistic and potentially excited, in terms of the opportunity. And the lady I spoke about, after she got over her anger, she went for about 12 interviews, and the first 6 interviews didn't go her way, and it was when we identified that she was having this underlying feeling in her chest that she hadn't dealt with, and we spent some time going over that. And eventually she looked at this as an opportunity, and one of the things we did was to identify 4 or 5 things that she really wanted to have in her next role. What did it look like, and why did she want that? And it felt like she was going to the market with a brief, and she was feeling in control, and she was feeling really optimistic about that. And she went from being rejected to eventually having 4 offers on the table. So people started to see a different side to her, and it was really, really positive and really exciting how just taking some time to work through it, not to rush it a little bit, and seeing that positivity. So the point here is I want you to be open-minded about yourself and what your future holds for you, and not look back at blaming or attributing any negativity to what's happened to you, and try and go forward with that positive light. There is a really great article which I posted at the end of this to have a look at, which is by the Harvard Business Review. And this is from Rebounding Career Setbacks by the 3 authors that I've mentioned here, Mark Smithson and Ashkenas. And it was written in 2014, but I think it has a really nice, and really nice examples of how people have gone back and, investigated and realised what their outcomes were, and that there was a path forward. So I'm ready for some questions, Jan, if you've got any questions for me.
Sure, thank you very much, Karen. Let's go with the questions. We have a question from Rachel, who's saying that she has gaps in her CV due to caring for a sick relative. She would like to know how best to address this with recruiters and on her CV.
Okay, that's great. So it's a really, really good, interesting question. And quite often I have people come to me and they've taken some time out. And I remember interviewing somebody, and actually on their CV, they'd written personal reasons. And the trouble is, the recruiter, you have to be careful when someone puts personal reasons, because you don't want to probe too deeply and upset somebody. And I asked her in the end and said, what was the reason that you took this time out for personal reasons? And she actually said it was to care for her one of her family members who was actually dying. And I said, it depends how much you want to put on your CV. It's entirely up to you. But I think, to be fair, it's quite good to put down that you were caring for somebody, or specifically what that reason was, because most people are empathetic. Everybody has a family member and somebody in there, and I think most companies, I certainly know in the UK where I am, we value that people would take time out and of their career, and that shows great empathy and caring that they do so. So and I think it's important that people, care for their family. So I think at this point, if you feel that you couldn't give 100% to your job and you need to take time out, it's very worth putting that on your CV and making that clear. And if you get to interview, I want you to feel positive about it. I want you to feel proud that you did that, because if you do, then your feeling will come across much more open. Whereas if you were to be defensive about it, like, I just took some time out, I don't really want to talk about it, then the person is going to be like, okay, why did they take that? Is there something underlying here? Were they in prison? Was there some other real bizarre reason why they took time out? So I think our imagination as recruiters can run away with ourselves. So I think you just need to be honest and clear, and position it in a way that you couldn't give 100% to your job at the time. So you took some time out, but now you're in a position to return, and you're excited and motivated to return to the workplace. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. We have a question from John, actually just sent us a follow-up question, so that's perfect. Let's see. It's a very sector-specific question, Karen. So you may, if you feel you prefer to give a more generic answer, feel free. But I'm still going to read you the full question. So John is saying, I am an investment banker who has been made redundant. I have good track record of raising large sum of money through the capital markets. My few conversations with headhunters for CEO role in a startup a digital bank startup, also came back with comments that the client wants someone who is a plug and play fit, someone who has been involved or already in digital bank operations. And John says, I wonder, how can that be a reason, since I was approached with the headhunter's full knowledge of my lack of direct experience in digital banking. I did stress I was qualified in digital marketing, which can be harnessed to supplement the role at a digital bank in the short time. So his original question was basically, how can he transition out of investment banking job into a strategic management role in a company such as these digital banks?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I understand. I understand exactly what you're saying. Again, it's not the sector I work specifically in. But I understand that working in capital marketing, wanting to transition, there is definitely some challenges in doing so, because people do want that sector specific experience. What I would do is I would start to look and map out what your experience you actually have in that sector. And you need to make it really clear, and it might be that you even do some interim work, or even some work on a short period where you work potentially even on a reduced fee, or for somebody, if it's somebody in that sector, where you can just get some understanding of your sector, of the new sector in digital, because in terms of the digital banking, because there is that big gap, and at the moment there'll be a potential glut of people in the market who do have those skills. So I would say it's looking at identifying where those gaps are that they have, and looking how you can beef that up really yourself by mapping out. And it may be, as I said, doing some free work or voluntary work, or working with somebody who to get a leg up and to get something in there. But I would say, if in doubt, because it's not my sector, I would go to a career coach.
Okay, that's great. Barbara just
Yeah,
sent us
that's it.
a new question as well. Interesting one. How would you write? How would you write on your CV that you left for another reason, like not feeling respected and not wanting to be in a toxic environment? Is it worth to mention anything at all, or how to frame a situation like this in an interview?
Brilliant question. Okay, so if someone said to you, I work in a toxic environment, what would you think? You'd think immediately that person's being negative, wouldn't you? You'd think, oh, was it toxic, or was it that person? And it would, and also it would start to make you think the person you're talking to is feeling quite bitter. So I think that it's a good way is to reframe, and to maybe think about not the environment or the culture, but maybe think of what the company goals were at the time. And I would say that the company goals that you were working to weren't aligned with what your current goals and career were, and that you were looking for these goals or careers or this skill set. And I would turn it as a positive into your background, rather than saying the company you work for was toxic. Because to me, that sounds across as being quite bitter. And also, going back to my slide, it's also maybe blaming the company for a certain situation, rather than taking ownership for yourself. So I would say, it's good to reframe it in a positive way.
Okay, thank you. Claudia would like to know, how do you position yourself if you want to apply for a less senior role than the one you're having right now?
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So I think, Claudia, really a good point there is it's the language you're using. So it's a less senior role, and just because it's a less senior role in one company, it doesn't mean to say it's less senior in another. So I don't know the context of it. So for example, you could be working as a head of marketing in one company, and then move sideways into a larger company or different structured organization, and that job title could be senior marketing, not head of marketing, or in a similar sort of transitional way. And if that is the case, then it's looking at the skill set really, and avoiding the thought and the thought process that you're taking a step back. And I think using and avoiding the language of I'm taking a step back, or I'm looking to not be, you know, I'm going backwards in my career, all things to avoid when positioning this, and more that I have the skills and experience for this role. This is my background, this is what I can offer you, and this is where I can add value into your company, rather than, you know, saying this is a less senior role, which is seen as being quite negative.
But in that case, how would a recruiter react? Wouldn't they think that this person is overqualified for the role, for instance?
I think it depends. I mean, I think it's also how you position your CV. So, I mean, if you applied for a senior marketing manager role and your job title previously was VP of marketing, then and every job title you'd had was VP of marketing, I think the person would be thinking, they would just make that assumption that that you know, why are they doing that? But I think the point is to put the context of your role and explain, you know, I was VP of marketing, but it was, you know, the size of the organisation, the context of that organisation. So the reason I say this, I had someone that sent their CV to me, and they put down they were VP of marketing, but when I interviewed them, they were a sole charge person in a really small company, and they're actually quite junior. But their title gave them the indication that they were actually really senior. So, you know, I think what I'm saying is the job title can also be misleading with the word senior and junior, and it is about what you can do for the job. And I think some companies love to have somebody who has got more experience and are coming back into a job that's less senior for them, but some companies are looking for somebody on that career trajectory, and I think it depends how you tell that story on your CV and how you're explaining the journey that you're on, in terms of the context of what your companies have done, and you know what the skill sets are that you've done in your company. And you know, if you're applying for a job and you've basically you know, you previously put on the very top of your CV, I have been responsible for a P&L and I've run 1,000 people and I've been responsible for this, and you're just applying for a much more junior job, then you need to explain, there definitely needs to be a profile on your CV on why you're making that decision, but it needs to be reframed in a really positive way.
Of course. Okay, fantastic.
And an opportunity on why you're doing this and why you're giving it back.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one final question from Ben. So you covered that a little bit already in your slide, but Ben is saying, I'm struggling to transition from sales leadership to something else, especially since I have been not working due to COVID. Any advice?
Yes. So I would say this is again a really interesting point, and the main part, if you're working in sales leadership already, I guess you're already working at a management level, so you probably have some management skills. So I would say step back from yourself and look and list down what those management skills are. You know, are you running appraisals? Are you leading a team? Have you developed somebody? And start to break down what those leadership skills look like, irrelevant of whether it's in sales, but in terms of the managing and leading of people. And then I would look at how you could translate that into another job, and how you could take that over into what else you're doing. Obviously, I don't know what else the other job is that you're looking for, but that was how I position that. I would look at your core skills in your area, and I'd make sure that was very much on your CV, at the very top of it, and made very explicitly clear.
Fantastic. Well, I'm receiving some very nice comments about today's session, Karen. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule for being with us today. I think it was a fantastic session, and from what the comments I see coming in, it looks like the audience agrees. So that's great.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you everybody for attending today. You will receive, as always, an email from us in about an hour's time, which will contain a link to download Karen's slides if you want to refer to them later, and of course as well a link to access the recording of this session. So thanks everybody. We'll see you again soon, hopefully for another premium webinar. And Karen, I hope we'll get a chance to do another one at a later stage this year.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye everybody.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.